Permanent Record by Edward Snowden. Part 2, Session 11. The System. I'm going to press pause here for a moment to explain something about my politics at age 22. I didn't have any. Instead, like most young people, I had solid convictions that I refused to accept were not truly mine, but rather a contradictory cluster of inherited principles. My mind was a mashup of the values I was raised with and the ideals I encountered online. It took me until my late 20s to finally understand that so much of what I believed or of what I thought I believed was just youthful imprinting. We learn to speak by imitating the speech of the adults around us, and in the process of that learning, we wind up also imitating their opinions until we have deluded ourselves into thinking that the words we are using are our own. My parents were, if not dismissive of politics in general, then certainly dismissive of politicians. To be sure, this dismissal had little in common with the disaffection of non voters or partisan disdain. Rather, it was a certain, bemused detachment particular to their class, which nobler ages have called the federal civil service or the public sector, but which our own time tends to refer to as the deep state or the other shadow or the shadow government. None of those epithets, however, really captures what it is, a class of career officials. Incidentally, perhaps one of the last functional middle classes in American life, who, non elected and non appointed, serve or work in government, either at one or the independent agencies, from the CIA and NSA to the IRS, the FCC, and so on, or at one of the executive departments, state, treasury, defense, justice, and the like. These were my parents. These were my people. A nearly 3 million strong professional government workforce dedicated to assisting the amateurs chosen by the electorate and appointed by the elected in fulfilling their political duties or, in the words of the oath, in faithfully executing their offices. These civil servants who stay in their positions even as administrators come and go, work as diligently under Republicans as under Democrats because they ultimately work for the government itself, providing core continuity and stability of rule. These were also the people who, when their country went to war, answered the call. That's what I had done after 9/11, and I found that the patriotism my parents had taught me was easily converted into nationalist fervor. For a time, especially in my run up to joining the army, my sense of the word came to resemble the duality of the least sophisticated video games, where good and evil are clearly defined and unquestionable. However, once I returned from the army and redirected myself to computing, I gradually came to regret my marital fantasies. The more I developed my abilities, the more I matured and realized that the technology of communications had a chance of succeeding where the technology of violence had failed. Democracy could never be imposed at the point of a gun, but perhaps it could be sown by the spread of silicon and fiber. In the early 2000s, the internet was still just barely out of its formative period, and to my mind at least, it offered a more authentic and complete incarnation of American ideals than even America itself. A place where everyone was equal. Check. A place dedicated to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Check, check, check. It helped that Nearly all the major founding documents of internet culture framed it in terms reminiscent of American history. Here was this wide open new frontier that belonged to anyone bold enough to settle it, swiftly becoming colonized by governments and corporate interests that were seeking to regulate it for power and profit. The large companies that were charging large fees for hardware, for software, for the long distance phone calls that you needed back then to get online, and for knowledge itself, which was humanity's common inheritance, and so, by all rights, should have been freely available, were irresistible contemporary avatars of the British whose harsh taxation ignited the fervor for independence. The revolution wasn't happening in history textbooks, but now in my generation, and any of us could be part of it solely by dint of our abilities. This was thrilling to participate in the founding of a new society, one based not on where we were born or how we grew up or our popularity at school, but on our knowledge and technological ability. In school, I had to memorize the preamble to the US Constitution. Now its words were lodged in my memory alongside John Perry Barlow's A Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, which employed the same self evident, self elect plural pronoun. We are creating a word that all may enter without privilege or prejudice accorded by race, economic power, military force, or station of birth. We are creating a world where anyone, anywhere may express his or her beliefs, no matter how singular, without fear of being coerced into silence or conformity. This technological meritocracy was certainly empowering, but it could also be humbling, as I came to understand when I first went to work in the intelligence community. The decentralization of the internet merely emphasized the decentralization of computing expertise. I might have been the top computer person in my family or in my neighborhood, but to work for the IC meant testing my skills against everyone in the country and the world. The internet showed me the sheer quantity and variety of talent that existed and made clear that in order to flourish, I had to specialize. There were few different careers available to me as technologist. I could have become a software developer or as the job is more commonly called a programmer, writing the code that makes computers work. Alternatively, I could have become a hardware or network specialist, setting up the servers in their racks and running the wires, weaving the massive fabric that connects every computer, every device, and every file. Computers and computer programs were interesting to me, and so were the networks that linked them together. But I was most intrigued by their total functioning at a deeper level of abstraction, not as individual components but as an overarching system. I thought about this a lot while I was driving to and from Lindsay's house and to and from AACC. Car time has always been thinking time for me, and commutes are long on the crowded beltway. To be a software developer was to run the rest stops of the exits and to make sure that all the fast food and gas stations franchisees accorded with each other and with user expectations. To be a hardware specialist was to lay the infrastructure to grade and pave the roads themselves, while to be a network specialist was to be responsible for traffic control, manipulating sign and lights to safely route the time crush hordes to their proper designations. To get into system, however, was to be an urban planner, to take all the components available and ensure their interaction to maximum effect. It was pure and simple, like getting paid to play God, or at least a tin pot dictator. There are two main ways to be a systems guy. One is that you take possession of the whole of an existing system and maintain it gradually, making it more efficient and fixing it when it breaks. That position is called a system administrator or sysadmin. The second is that you analyze a problem such as how to store data or how to search across database and solve it by engineering a solution from a combination of existing components or by investing entirely new ones. This position is called a systems engineer. I eventually would do both of these jobs, working my way into administration and from there into engineering. Oblivious, though, out about how this intense engagement with the deepest levels of integration of computing technology was exerting an influence on my political convictions. I'll try not to be too abstract here, but I want you to imagine a system. It doesn't matter what system. It can be a computer system, an ecosystem, a legal system, or even a system of government. Remember, a system is just a bunch of parts that function together as a whole, which most people are only reminded of when something breaks. It's one of the great chastening facts of working with systems that the part of a system that malfunctions is almost never the part in which you notice the malfunction. In order to find what caused the system to collapse, you have to start from the point where you spotted the problem and trace the problem's effect logically through all the system's components. Because a sysadmin or engineer is responsible for such repairs, they have to be equally fluent in software, hardware, and networking. If the malfunction turns out to be a software issue, the repair might involve scrolling through line after line of code in a UN General Assembly's worth of programming languages. If it's a hardware issue, it might require going over a circuit board with a flashlight in the mouth and a soldering gun in hand, checking each connection. If networking is implicated, it might mean tracing every twist and turn of the cables that run above the ceiling and under the floor, connecting the distant data centers full of servers with an office full of laptops. Because systems work according to instructions or rules, such an analysis is ultimately a search for which rules fail, how and why, an attempt to identify the specific points where the internet where the intention of a rule was not adequately expressed by its formulation or application. Did the system fail because something was not communicated or because someone abused the system by accessing a resource they were not allowed to do? Or by accessing a resource they were allowed to but using it exploitatively? Was the job of one components stopped or impeded by another? Did one program or computer or group of people take over more than their fair share of the system? Over the course of my career, it became increasingly difficult for me to ask these questions about the technologies I was responsible for and not about my country. And it became increasingly frustrating to me that I was able to repair the former but not the latter. I ended my time in intelligence convinced that my country's operating system, its government, had decided that it functioned best when broken.